Hey guys, tonight we are going to slip quietly into the embroidered shoes of a Mughal princess, yes, the kind with an absurdly large entourage and a suspicious fondness for sandalwood, and we're going to follow her through the most carefully overpacked spiritual trip in history, a 40-day pilgrimage full of brocade, bureaucracy, and blisters. You'll be choosing which silk slippers won't give you grief on day 3, wrapping up rose-scented toiletries that no road dust can conquer, and discovering that yes, even royal journeys involve forgetting the one thing you absolutely swore you'd remember. Of course, you probably wouldn't survive this ordeal, not because of the heat, the distance, or even the lack of iced coffee, but because you'd be expected to make packing decisions without the help of spreadsheets or Pinterest boards. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start the day early. The sun has just nudged its way over the marble parapets of the palace, and the area is thick with the scent of jasmine, fresh ink, and mild tannic. Your pilgrimage leaves in 3 days, or maybe 2. The calendar got smudged, and no one wants to be the first to admit it. You slide your feet into a pair of soft, red-stitched silk slippers lined with goat leather. They're flattering and breathable, which, in a country where summer routinely tries to kill you, counts as a miracle. Still, you can't help but wonder whether you should have chosen the thicker pair. What if there are thorns? What if there are stairs? Your maid, who has seen this exact routine at least 6 times this week, pretends to busy herself folding a shawl. You hear the faintest sigh escape her. She knows you're about to overthink soap. Indeed, the next dilemma is hygiene. You are a royal, but you are also a practical human being, and 40 days on the road means you're going to want your sandalwood-scented body paste, your dried neem twigs for dental maintenance, and because you're not a monster, 3 bars of rose saffron cleansing soap packed in silk sachets. You debate the small vial of attar. Too extravagant? Or just the right level of this princess still smells faintly floral after 10 hours on a camel. Your brothers will travel light. Of course, some of them probably plan to wear the same trousers the entire trip. You, however, have standards, cuticles, and at least a vague interest in not smelling like a wool caravan blanket by day 12. The sandalwood paste goes in first. Carefully wrapped in beeswax paper, sealed in a tin with your initials etched in. The soap is trickier. It must be packed so that it doesn't melt. You assign your maid the task of tucking it into the cool space beneath your ivory hand mirror. That way, if it melts, at least your mirror will smell amazing. You pause to sip rosewater. Not because you're thirsty, but because you like the way it feels to hold the glass. Cool, slightly damp, and entirely unnecessary. Mughal luxury, after all, is about mastering the art of the beautiful inconvenience. By this time, the palace has begun to stir. You hear the soft groan of a camel being loaded, a wet thunk as a bundle of rugs is dropped in the courtyard, and the distant yell of someone already losing an argument over saddle buckles. It all feels incredibly real now. This isn't just a spiritual journey, it's also a logistical nightmare dressed in embroidered silk. 40 days of campfires, prayers, uncomfortable sleeping positions, and an alarming dependence on other people's memory. You make a mental list of all the things you're probably forgetting, then start a second list, just in case the first one is too obvious. Historians still argue whether princesses like you actually packed their own things. Some say you'd have had dozens of attendants doing it for you. Others claim it was a mixture of delegation and very selective control, like insisting on folding your prayer shawl just so, while cheerfully ignoring whether someone remembered to pack water. Either way, you're deeply involved in the shoe decision. You remember how last year's monsoon pilgrimage nearly destroyed your favorite pair, and there was that awful moment when your heels slipped off a damp step in Jaipur and you slid into the vegetable porters like a bowling ball. This time, you swear, you'll be ready. You pick out 2 backup pairs, one in dark green velvet, one in leather dyed with indigo and stitched with tiny pearls. Excessive? Maybe, but consider this. Your feet will be seen by at least 4 strangers a day. That's basically a public appearance, and yes, you're also bringing sandal socks. They itch, but they're ceremonial, and that matters. As the sun rises higher, you sit back, your slippers lined up like little soldiers at attention, your soap and paste nestled in a velvet pouch, and your sighs growing progressively more dramatic. It's going to be a long 3 days, and you haven't even started on what snacks to bring. It's barely mid-morning, and already your room looks like a Mughal warehouse exploded. A dozen brocade trunks are scattered across the marble floor, some open, some mysteriously closed again, after your maid grew overwhelmed and began tidying. Just to cope, silk shawls hang half out of drawers like exasperated ghosts. You're sitting cross-legged in the middle of it all, staring at a pile of luggage with the kind of quiet panic normally reserved for war councils. This is the great brocade luggage dilemma. Every journey begins with intention. You think, I'll tack light, you tell your maid. Only the essentials, you say it twice, even. But then the stacking begins. The red shawl with gold trim is essential. So is the lighter blue one, you'll need that if it's sunny. And the emerald one makes your eyes look gentle and wise. And if you end up meeting a holy person, you should at least look vaguely beatific. That's 3 shawls. For 1 day, multiply by 40. That's not light. That's a well-dressed hostage situation. You try to prioritize. The ceremonial slippers go in first, wrapped in muslin and nested like ducklings. Then the soft robes for prayer. Then to back up scarves in case you have to cover your head in a rush. You debate the third scarf for a while. One side of it is slightly more flattering in low light, which might matter if someone pains you in passing. You're not vain. You're just historically responsible. Outside, a servant sneezes. Inside, you stare at the jeweled clasps on a lacquered box and wonder if you really need to bring the engraved ivory comb set. Your mother gave it to you. So, emotionally, yes. But also, it weighs nearly a kilo and once attracted ants during a summer journey. It's cursed, but also pretty. Historians still argue whether these princesses traveled with excess on purpose as a statement of courtly abundance or whether it was simply a byproduct of being deeply attached to 12 different kinds of embroidered undershirts. Some suggest it was a display of political wealth, where the caravan itself became a moving extension of the empire. Others believe it was basic logistics. If your body needed comfort and your spirit needed devotion, your luggage needed options. You are firmly in the options camp. There is a minor crisis when you realize you packed 5 very similar beige tunics. Your cousin calls it your desert librarian collection. You pretend not to care. Beige is dignified. Beige is versatile. Beige says, this princess is ready for serious walking and also possibly to edit a sacred text. Still, you concede. Some color would be wise. You toss in a saffron robe with swirling blue vines embroidered along the hem. It smells faintly of cloves. It's also one of the few garments that doesn't itch under the arms when you sweat. Which you will. You absolutely will. You've seen the maps. One of your ladies-in-waiting drifts in, sees the mess, and immediately begins whispering to another servant about how Her Highness has entered the spiral. You let them talk. You are above panic. You are embracing controlled wardrobe chaos. You even toss in a tunic you haven't worn since the last eclipse. Just in case it's an omen. Somewhere outside, a camel makes a sound like it swallowed a drum. You ignore it. The camel is someone else's problem. You have decisions to make. The jewelry chest sits unopened at the edge of the room. It glimmers like an accusation. You're not supposed to wear much on pilgrimage. Simplicity is the ideal, but simplicity has layers. Spiritual simplicity doesn't mean you can't bring your mirror-polished toe rings, or the little silver hair comb with the tiny fish carved on it. They're symbolic and lucky. You decide to bring only one necklace. The coral one your grandmother gave you. It's heavy, but it makes you feel safe. You slip it into a silk pouch and tuck it between a cotton underoe and a pair of spare socks embroidered with elephants. Practical, yet majestic. A loud knock interrupts your packing trance. One of your younger cousins bursts in, holding an enormous cloak. She insists you must bring because it's pilgrimage colored. You ask what that means. She shrugs, brown and vaguely holy. You accept the cloak. It goes in with everything else. You no longer understand where anything is. The trunks are being closed and reopened on a 5-minute loop. One is stuffed only with undergarments and sachets of dried lavender. Another contains 3 folding stools and a collapsible writing desk. You quietly wonder if you're becoming a walking household. At one point, your maid accidentally knocks over a sandalwood box, and 3 tiny perfume bottles roll under your bed. You retrieve them, marveling at how easily they could have been forgotten. You label them emergency serenity kit and pack them last. As the sun reaches its zenith, you slump back onto a heap of shawls, surrounded by enough brocade to clothe a small dynasty. You've done it. You've reached peak luggage. Of course, tomorrow, someone will remember an entire category of things you forgot. But today, you've earned your rosewater. With your trunks finally subdued into something that might pass for packed, you pivot to the more delicate art of selecting devotional items, those spiritual accoutrements that sit at the intersection of reverence and royal taste. It begins with the prayer beads. You've been gifted dozens over the years, some carved from sandalwood, others of polished agate, and one particularly unholy set made of glittering onyx that feels better suited to fashion than faith. Still, that one makes a satisfying click when handled, which is undeniably soothing on long dusty roads. You lay out the contenders on a soft muslin cloth. 27 beads, $33.99. The counts vary, each one attached to a different school of thought or style of prayer. You try to remember if there's a rule for which to bring. There probably is, but at this point, spiritual decorum is wrestling with personal preference, and personal preference is winning. You select 3 sets, one traditional, one sentimental, and one you just happen to like the sound of. It's like choosing background music for your soul. Then come the perfume bottles. Now, this is dangerous territory. Because if you open one, you will open 5, and then you'll spend an hour sniffing your way into a Roseanne Must trance spiral, which is exactly what happens. You open the amber bottle first, warm, earthy, vaguely seductive. Probably not appropriate for pilgrimage, but deeply comforting. Then the rose one. Then sandalwood. Then the ludicrously expensive imported myrrh bottle your uncle brought back from Persia, which smells like spicy nostalgia and ruined budgets. You sit on your cushion, surrounded by glass vials, your fingertips oily with dabs of sacred scent, and you think, how many of these can I bring before it becomes less about holiness and more about olfactory one-upmanship? Historians still argue whether Mughal princesses or perfume, while traveling for religious purposes. Some point to surviving flasks and courtly poems that suggest a constant halo of scent. Others insist such journeys require abstaining from luxuries, even if only symbolically. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere between piety and pragmatic vanity. You choose 5 small bottles. They nestle into a wooden case lined with padded velvet. You add a handwritten tag for spiritual con and social emergencies. Next, you gather a small collection of personal scriptures. Not full Qurans, those are too large and too sacred to risk grow dust, but excerpts, verses, and copies of favorite surahs written in careful calligraphy on folded palm leaf slips. One booklet is wrapped in gold-threaded cloth and smells faintly of turmeric. Another has a pressed marigold petal still tucked between the pages. You keep it for luck, of course. Your favorite devotional item is one that no one really knows you bring. A single line of poetry scribbled years ago on a scrap of parchment. It's not religious, it's not even that good. But it was handed to you by a palace gardener who said, with a wink, in case you forget to look up. You smile, fold it gently, and slip it into your traveling prayer pouch. Then you spot it. The astrolab. It leans awkwardly on a low shelf, its brass arms half tilted, like it's been left mid-sentence. You haven't used it in months. Possibly years. You barely remember how. But still, you're going on a long journey. There will be stars. You might need to calculate the Qibla, or maybe you just want the option. You dust it off. It's heavier than you remember, and you're not even convinced it still works. But that's never stopped you before. You wedge it between a bundle of prayer mats and a box of dried apricots. It's fine. If it breaks, it'll still look noble. In a tragic sort of way, a serving girl tiptoes in and informs you that your aunt wants to know if you'll be bringing the traveling prayer rug she gifted you. The one with the unusually aggressive floral pattern. You say yes. Because if you don't, she asks again. And because part of being royal is knowing when to pretend something is your idea. By mid-afternoon, you sit back and assess the spiritual portion of your packing. It's not bad. You've got enough to be properly devout. Just enough luxury to stay sane. And if you're honest, more than enough perfume to baptize a camel. Outside, you hear the rhythmic thump of drums. Someone's practicing the farewell procession music already. A faint hum of movement builds in the air. People are polishing brass buckles. Camels are being bribed with dates. Someone is loudly arguing about tent placement and being ignored. The journey is creeping closer, but inside your chambers, surrounded by prayer beads, folded cloths, and fragrance that clings softly to your sleeves, everything still feels calm. For now. By the time the kitchen sends for you, your room smells like roses, myrrh, and the faint desperation of overpacking. You make your way across the courtyard, stepping over a half-sorted pile of tent ropes and one oblivious peacock. The scent of toast and lentils floats on the breeze. Today, the palace cooks have prepared your tiffin provisions, the great, multi-layered lunch towers that will become the heart and soul of your pilgrimage diet. And by heart and soul, you mean the only reason you won't turn into a snarling, sandal-throwing mess halfway to the holy site. You enter the kitchen court and are greeted by a wall of organized chaos. Brass tiffin tins gleam in neat towers, each labeled in chalky script. A cook waves at you with a ladle still dripping with clarified butter. "Your Highness," he says, "we've made the tamarind chutney less emotional this time." You nod, sagely. Last time, the chutney caused two caravanners to cry and one to question the existence of spice limits. The food is, of course, absurdly well prepared. There are slow-cooked lentils infused with asafoetida and garlic, rice mixed with dried rose petals and a sprinkle of pistachio, and a flatbread so thin it practically whispers when touched. One tin contains little fried balls of chickpea flour, your childhood favorite. Another is layered with sour mango pickles so potent you're sure they could end a small war. You taste everything. Not because you're supervising, you just like snacks. There's one hiccup. The jaggery sweets didn't set properly and have become what the cook calls a spiritual paste. You approve them anyway. Pilgrimage isn't about perfection. It's about endurance, resilience, and having at least one sugary thing to eat when your feet feel like boiled okra. Historians still argue over the exact composition of royal travel food. Some suggest elaborate, multi-course meals were prepared daily by traveling chefs. Others argue that pre-packed tiffins like these were common, rotating through durable dishes designed to survive bumpy roads, shifting tents, and the occasional drop saddlebag. Your cooks, clearly aware of this debate, have decided to hedge their baits and prepare both. You end up approving over a dozen tiffin towers. Some for yourself, others for your ladies-in-waiting, your elderly chaperone, and at least 3 unspecified noblewomen who have somehow attached themselves to your caravan at the last minute. They always do. Like dust and unsolicited poems, you also order a few extras, just in case. The road is long, and sometimes what you really need is not divine revelation but an emergency tin of fried fenugreek for ittrs. As you leave the kitchen court, a young assistant presents you with a cloth pouch containing tamarind balls, sugared rose petals, and what he insists is a secret spice nut blend for morale. You raise an eyebrow, he grins and shrugs. You accept. Never insult a gift from someone with unlimited access to your future dinners. Back in your room, your maid looks horrified as the tiffin towers arrive. There's barely space left between the trunks and the spiritual supplies, but somehow, everything must fit. You suggest storing the food beneath the folding writing desk. She suggests you bring fewer perfumes. Neither of you win. While she juggles the tins, you focus on a more personal task, selecting your emergency snack pouch. Yes, you are bringing one. It's embroidered with tiny pineapples and fits neatly in your saddlebag. Inside, you tuck a palm-sized roll of sweet sesame, a few crunchy fried lentils, and a tiny clay pot of mint chili paste. You label it "Do not touch or perish." Food, of course, is more than survival. It's comfort, memory, a way to stay tethered to your palace. While moving through strange and shifting landscapes, you remember your mother telling you that even the prophet packed dates before a journey. And then she added, "So obviously, you need at least a dozen kinds of pickles." It's not about gluttony, it's about continuity. You glance around the room, now overflowing with carefully packed meals and precariously stacked tins, and realize something deeply Mughal about this moment. Devotion and indulgence live side by side. You're preparing for a sacred journey, but you're also making sure it tastes good. Outside, the sun has begun its lazy descent, casting long shadows that slip across the palace tiles. Someone is singing softly a caravan chant, perhaps, or a lullaby for a restless camel. You recline on a cushion, pop a tamarind ball into your mouth, and let the tan jolt you pleasantly awake. The pilgrimage looms ahead like a shimmering mirage, half spiritual, half logistical circus, but at least you won't go hungry. The scent of tamarind still clings faintly to your fingertips as you return to your chambers, where soft stacks of shawls and haphazardly labeled trunks await your verdict. Everything looks slightly more chaotic now, not messier just sentient, like the luggage itself is beginning to suspect that the road ahead may not be as spiritually serene as advertised. You don't sit. You hover, because now it's time to address the next most sacred part of your pilgrimage preparation, the cosmetics. Not in the grand, ceremonial sense. This isn't a wedding or a court debut. There will be no jeweled bindis or layers of crushed coral highlighter today. But even a journey to a holy site deserves its rituals of care, and yours begin with a small box inlaid with turquoise and mischief. Inside, a delicate collection of powders, balms, and oils, each carefully chosen to survive 40 days of heat, wind, and questionable water pressure. You start with rose balm. Always the rose balm. It's made by a discreet old woman, 3 courtyards over, who speaks only in limericks and once claimed her formula could charm a cobra or calm a crisis. Whether or not that's true, it's the only thing that reliably soothes your lips when the desert winds turn on you. Next is your jar of sandalwood paste. You lift the lid and inhale deeply. It's cool, earthy, and instantly calming, the olfactory equivalent of a reassuring pat on the back. You dab a little on your wrist just to test the consistency. Smooth, creamy, ready. Then you reach for the coal. There's no denying this one's vanity. A fine stick of black antimony, carved with a silver grip, encased in a velvet sleeve like a prized relic. You don't need it. No one expects you to line your eyes during prayer. But the truth is, a precise line of coal offers structure, focus, a sense of composure when the caravan grows dusty and disoriented. It makes your eyes look steady even when your soul feels less so. Historians still argue whether women of your rank were expected to abandon adornment entirely during religious travel. Some records suggest a symbolic stripping down, a return to simplicity. Others indicate that even spiritual devotion didn't negate the deeply ingrained Mughal belief in grace, pose, and scent as expressions of divine alignment. You, personally, find holiness and hair oil to be entirely compatible. Speaking of which, jasmine or sesame? You hold up the 2 tiny jars. Jasmine is your favorite, of course. Fragrant, luxurious, infused with crushed petals and a drop of orange flower. But sesame is the practical choice. It protects the scalp, keeps you grounded, smells slightly medicinal, which your more pious aunts insist is a virtue. You weigh both in your hands for an absurd amount of time. Then, with the solemn gravity of a court decision, pack them both. They fit snugly into a leather pouch beside your comb set. 3 pieces of carved sandalwood, polished smooth from years of use. The teeth of the largest one are wide and sturdy, perfect for wine-tangled hair. The smallest is narrow, used only when you're trying to impress someone, which, you remind yourself, you will absolutely not be doing on this journey. Probably, tucked beneath the combs is a silver tweezer, no longer sharp but still better than nothing. You haven't told anyone you're bringing it, not because it's a secret, but because there are some items so personal, so quietly vital, that their presence needs no announcement, like a favorite pen, or a backup snack, or a single, perfectly folded cotton handkerchief with your childhood nickname stitched into the corner. That goes in too. You pause, then you add another, because you're human. A knock on the door interrupts your concentration, followed by your cousin's unmistakably theatrical voice. "I'm not bringing a mirror," she announces without being asked, "because I believe in inner beauty." You reply through the door, "Lovely. I'll pack one for both of us," she gasps. Footsteps retreat. In a huff, you allow yourself a smile and continue assembling your cosmetic kit. Not too much, not too little, just the things that let you feel like yourself, even while bouncing across the subcontinent on a heavily perfumed camel with a bad attitude. For the final touch, you reach for the old indigo-dyed face cloth. It's frayed now, soft at the corners, and smells faintly of the cedar chest where you keep your secrets. You haven't traveled without it in years. It's your makeshift towel, your impromptu veil, your emergency "I can't look at anyone right now" solution. You fold it gently and nestle it between your jars and your comb. There. Done. You close the kit, secure the tie, and place it atop one of the brocade trunks with the reverence of a priest laying down a sacred text. This isn't just makeup. It's not even just maintenance. It's intention. It's the decision to move through the world through dust, heat, and obligation still wholly yourself. Outside, the light is changing, afternoon shifting toward amber. You hear distant laughter, the sharp bark of a camel, and the occasional clatter of someone trying to fold a tent that refuses to be folded. Everything's moving. Everything's inching toward the unknown. You sit back on your cushion, cross-legged, hands loose in your lap, and breathe. Not the shallow breath of checklist chasing or ceremonial panic. A real breath, long, quiet, full. And as you exhale, you imagine yourself on the road, eyes ringed with coal, skin faintly dusted with sandalwood, smelling faintly of jasmine, and laughing because someone just realized they packed 20 turbans, but forgot their under-robe. You, however, will be ready, softly scented, perfectly moisturized, and spiritually aligned, give or take a hair out of place. The sunlight in your chamber is now falling at a different angle, long and golden, striping the room with the calm finality of late afternoon. Your cosmetic kit rests proudly atop a trunk like a jewel box on a sleeping elephant. The sandalwood still lingers in the air. A bird calls somewhere in the garden, followed by the faint shout of a porter dropping something expensive. You glance toward the corner of your chamber, or a rather mismatched assortment of books, scrolls, and instruments has begun to quietly assert its presence. This next phase of packing is not for appearances or aromas. This is for the soul, or at least the part of it that gets itchy after too many hours staring at dust and camel tails. You rise and walk to the bundle. A shawl that had been concealing it falls away, revealing your collection, not vast, but thoughtful. A slim book of Persian poetry, a folding slate for writing, an odd, slightly dented astrolabe, a stack of palm leaf folios so carefully tied you suspect someone has rewound them every evening for the past year. You begin with the poetry. The slim volume has no title on its cover, just faded leather and a faint scent of ink. You flip to a page at random, a verse about a single jasmine petal floating in a bowl of milk. You don't understand why it makes you ache slightly, but it does. You close the book gently and wrap it in a soft cloth. It goes first. Next, a bestiary, another small book, this one with illuminated animals that seem more symbolic than zoological. The lion looks like it wants to apologize. The elephant is nearly square. You've carried this on every journey since you were a child. It's never once been accurate, but it's never once failed to amuse. Historians still debate whether women of your rank traveled with books at all. Some argue your reading was confined to formal instruction within palace walls. Others point to extensive female patronage of literature, poetry, and religious commentary. There are even whispered tales of princesses composing verse on caravan trails, carefully inked in pomche, then forgotten in the folds of embroidered cushions. You believe in those women because you are one of them. The ink kit comes next. It's modest, just a flat wooden box with 2 compartments, one for ground ink tablets, the other for sharpened reeds. There's a tiny rag tucked inside, stained in a dozen shades of black and brown. You add a folded scrap of parchment, already half filled with lines from a dream you had 2 nights ago. The words are crooked, rushed, but you don't erase them. Dreams, you've found, are better reread than rewritten. Then there's the astrolabe.o. The astrolabe. It doesn't really work. Or rather, it does, but only in a temperamental way, like a cat that sometimes brings you dead lizards, but mostly just naps in judgment. Still, it's beautiful. Brass, with delicate latticework, a bit battered. The reedy always tilts slightly to the west, no matter how many times you fix it. But it belonged to your grandmother, who once used it to find the Qibla in the middle of a sandstorm. Or so she claimed. You dust it off and cradle it for a moment. It hums softly in your hands, or perhaps that's just memory echoing through metal. You wrap it in thick cotton, place it carefully in a cushioned box, and whisper, "Do try not to fall apart this time." One of your younger attendants enters, sees the astrolabe, and asks if it's a musical instrument. You don't correct her. She leaves the room with a pouch of dates and a confident air of understanding. The rest of your reading material is more functional copies of short surahs, palm leaf extracts from a dream interpretation manual, and one rather questionable guide to herbal remedies that includes such gems as chew fennel and lost and apply mashed fig to forehead for clarity. You don't expect to need it, but it makes for good reading when the road is long and the camels are grumpy. Among the scrolls is one you almost forgot, a letter you began writing to yourself during your last journey. You read the opening lines and wince. It's more dramatic than you remember. Something about the eternal longing for home and a spiritual thirst that cannot be slaked. You snort, refold it, and slip it back into its pouch. Let the future version of you deal with that emotional spiral later. As the light dims further, you place all your written and written upon treasures into a single lacquered trunk. It clicks shut with a quiet little chuck as though it's sealing, not just pages and brass, but hours of your life spent thinking, dreaming, wondering. You rest your hands on the lid for a moment, feeling its warmth. The astrolabe inside shifts slightly, as if stretching. You whisper to it, "Behave." It does not reply. But it will. Just then, you hear the distant sound of someone rehearsing their goodbye speech in the courtyard. Loudly, with too much emotion, and far too many flourishes, you sigh. Your own farewell will be simpler. You have no need for declarations. You'll say your prayers, tie your scarf, and climb into the palanquin when it's time. But between now and then, you will know that you carry not just clothes, food, or cosmetics but words. Ancient, fragrant, slightly ridiculous words. Yours, and others, and one astrolabe that points, always, toward home. There is, perhaps, no moment in the pilgrimage preparation more chaotic than when the animals arrive. Not the noble horses or the groaning camels. They come later, with pomp and cranky grace. No. The true storm begins, and the personal menagerie gets involved. You've barely finished sealing your lacquered book trunk when a flurry of hooves, feathers, and one surprisingly loud goat explodes into the courtyard. They've arrived, your maid sighs, already reaching for her crisis. Veil. First through the gate, 2 peacocks. Elegant, resplendent, and clearly aware of it. They strut across the marble tiles like entitled court officials, stopping only to inspect their own reflections in a polished brass urn. One gives a shrill cry. You interpret it as a complaint about travel conditions. Next, the goat, a pale, short-legged creature with an expression of perpetual disapproval. It's your aunt's, technically, but she insists you bring it along for luck. The goat once survived a monsoon flood by climbing into a hammock, and now she's considered a spiritual mascot of sorts. You've named her Farzana, after a legendary courtesan known for interrupting sermons with better punchlines. Farzana snorts, as if to say, you will suffer. And finally, because no journey is complete without the proper dose of questionable decisions, your monkey. Small, silent, suspiciously clean. You didn't ask for a monkey, but 3 days ago, your younger brother handed you the creature with the solemn words, "He understands lawning." You have yet to see any evidence of this, but he does have soulful eyes and an unsettling way of tilting his head when you speak. You've named him Mirza. He is currently perched atop one of your trunks, chewing the corner of a prayer mat. Your staff has assigned 1 handler to each animal, or so they claim. In reality, the handlers appear more interested in gossiping, adjusting turbans, and daring one another to approach Farzana when she's chewing. Historians still puzzle over the presence of animals in royal Mughal caravans. Some say they were symbolic, a sign of abundance, grace, and divine favor. Others argue they were practical, goats for milk, peacocks for pest control, monkeys for... well, no one's quite sure. You suspect it was all of the above, plus the unspoken rule that no noblewoman should ever appear to travel without her own mildly terrifying entourage. You oversee their loading like a general inspecting troops. The peacocks are coaxed into a large, open-air travel cage lined with straw and laced with jasmine vines for their mood. Naturally, Farzana is bribed with dried mulberries into a sturdy crate and warned not to bite the tent poles again. Mirza climbs into a covered basket on his own accord, curling up atop a folded shawl as if he's decided to embrace the trip on his own. Complicated terms. You return to your chambers only to realize you now have to pack for them. Not everything, of course. Their attendants will bring food and basic supplies. But you know what happens when basic is left to interpretation. You once saw someone try to feed a parrot raw onion and nearly start a diplomatic incident. So, you begin assembling their kit. A pouch of goat treats, sugar-dipped chickpeas, a spare mirror for the peacocks because they'll get restless otherwise, and a strip of cloth scented with rose and sandalwood for Mirza, who seems to fall asleep faster when wrapped in it. You briefly consider whether you're raising noble companions or extremely spoiled freeloaders, then pack 2 small clay bowls anyway, one etched with lila, one with stars. You add a final note to your packing list. Find out if monkeys need shoes, then cross it out. Some things are best left unanswered. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows across the courtyard tiles, you pause to admire your temporary zoo. It is ridiculous. It is deeply unnecessary. It is perfect. Auntie Noor arrives just as you finish tying the last knot on the peacock cage. She walks with purpose, trailing bangles and unsolicited advice. You remembered the goat? She asks without preamble. You nod. And the monkey? You nod again. She gives a tight, approving hum. Good. Bring the monkey to my room later. I want him to listen to music. She exits. You don't ask questions, because if there's one thing this pilgrimage is already teaching you, it's that every royal journey includes at least 3 mystifying detours. One spiritual, one logistical, and one inexplicably involving animals. You lean against a trunk and exhale. Tomorrow, you depart. You will ride out in a procession of color and quiet nerves. You will sleep beneath canvas stitched with prayers and guarded by men who haven't bathed in 2 weeks. You will walk dusty paths where others have walked for centuries, carrying burdens both literal and invisible. And you will do it accompanied by a goat named Farzana, Tamir-obsessed birds, and a monkey who may or may not be your spiritual guy. You close your eyes for a moment. The air smells of dry grass, ink, and feathers. You are almost ready. The sun is barely up the next morning when you begin sorting the pouches of spice. The courtyard is still wrapped in a faint mist, the marble cool beneath your feet, but the bustle has already begun. Porters stacking bundles, stable bows wrestling with bridles, your aunt loudly informing someone that her feet do not respond to low morale stitching. You, meanwhile, crouch before a row of brocade pouches lined up like courtiers at morning durbar, each one fragrant, filled, and dangerously overdue for inventory. Spices. Not a necessity, some might say, but then some have never tried eating lentils boiled over a smoky campfire without a dash of crushed cumin and a whisper of clove. You refuse to suffer for devotion when flavor is still within reach. The first pouch holds saffron. Golden, fragile, so potent that even one stray thread can perfume an entire pot of rice. You unwrap the muslin lining gently, as if unveiling a treasure map. The saffron came from Kashmir, hand-picked, sun-dry, and carried to you in a box that once held earrings. You're only bringing a thimbleful, enough for 1, maybe 2 dramatic meals, but in your mind, they will be very dramatic. Next, cardamom pods, green, smooth, unreasonably comforting. You crush one between your fingers and inhale, sweet, warm, and strangely calming like a hymn recited from memory. You drop a handful into a smaller bag marked emergencies. Your maid raises an eyebrow at the label. You shrug. Sacred doesn't mean joyless. Historians still argue about how much spice royalty truly traveled with. Some scholars claim caravans carried entire trunks of it, especially for those with sensitive palates or political agendas. Others insist it was symbolic, 1 pouch of nutmeg to imply 10. You believe the answer lies, as usual, in between. Bring just enough to improve morale, but not so much that a goat eats it by mistake. Speaking of which, Farzana bleated aggressively this morning after nibbling on a peppercorn. She's fine, slightly more energetic than usual. The monkey, Mirza, now refuses to sit next to her. You continue sorting. There's fennel, for digestion, cloves, for sweetening breath and secretly warding off headaches, a pinch of black salt, because your cousin insists it prevents spiritual fatigue. You're not sure what that means, but the salt sparkles like volcanic glass, and the pouch it came in smells like rain, so you keep it. Then the turmeric dilemma. You know better than to travel without it. It's medicinal, spiritual, wound healing, possibly ghost repelling, but it stains everything. You still remember that unfortunate incident on your last journey when an entire robe turned yellow and you had to pretend it was a religious commentary. This time, you double wrap it, seal it with wax, and mark it with a skull symbol, just in case. Finally, you reach for your oddest treasure, a single dried chili, braided with a strand of jute and a silver bead, a gift from an elderly kitchen maid who once told you, for luck, and for keeping tedious people at bay. It's ridiculous, it's essential. It goes in the front pouch. You pause, surveying your spice collection like a sultan inspecting a fleet. It's not vast, but it's powerful. Each scent, each tingle of heat and memory, connects you to something: home, family, resilience. You don't just eat with these spices, you remember with them. You soothe, you fortify, you stack the pouches into a shallow basket lined with linen and dried mint leaves. The mint will keep the weevils out, supposedly, or at least confuse them. You place the basket inside one of the food trunks, nestled next to the tiffin towers and beneath a folded napkin embroidered with your grandmother's favorite proverb, "A hungry mouth forgets wisdom." But not pepper. As you rise, you spot a commotion near the gate. A trader has arrived with last-minute goods, ropes, lantern oil, and most importantly travel fruit. You rush over, because your cousin has the self-control of a windstorm, and once tried to buy a mango with your ring. Within minutes, you've secured your bounty. Dried apricots, candied tamarind, little rolls of fig wrapped in banana leaf, and limes preserved in salt and sunshine. These go into your personal morale stash, a pouch tucked deep into your saddlebag, next to your secret poetry scroll and the monkey's spare sash. You return to your chamber as the sun edges higher, lighting up the marble like a stove top. It's hot already, the kind of heat that glows. You wipe your brow with a scarf scented faintly with turmeric and victory. And then, because you're a woman of bounds, you add one last item, a small, round jar of dried rose petals mixed with sugar crystals, for no reason but comfort. You've no plan for it, no recipe. You may eat them one night under the stars, or crush them into tea during a quiet moment, or gift them to a tired traveler who looks like they've forgotten what joe tastes like. The jar fits neatly between your coal stick and your palm leaf notebook. You close the lid. Exhale. Some people pack for survival, you pack for continuity, for memory, for pleasure without shame, and, if needed, for one very spicy intervention on a dusty roadside. The next morning begins with something that sounds suspiciously like swearing, though, to be fair, it's hard to be sure when the words come from an elderly tent mender with no teeth and a thick dialect. You peek through the latticework of your window just in time to see a roll of embroidered canvas sail across the courtyard like a flying carpet, having an existential crisis. Tense. Of all the details that go into preparing a royal pilgrimage, none generate quite so much drama as the temporary homes that will shadow you across the landscape like flapping, sun-bleached guardians. And as the senior-most woman in the traveling party, your tent is not merely shelter, it's a declaration. It must be stately, modest, windproof, flame-retardant, folding, waterproof, spiritual, comfortable, spacious, private, glorious, and, if possible, able to withstand both bandit raids and Andy Soraya's disappointment. You walk out into the nose. The tent team is in full panic. Fabric bundles are unrolling across the courtyard. Poles are being sorted by length with the seriousness of a royal sword inspection, and someone is waving an inventory list with the wild abandon of a person who knows they will be blamed either way. You approach your tent, a domed pavilion of deep green cotton, edged in red trim, and stitched with gold-threaded vines. It was once used for a wedding reception. You've repurposed it for spiritual transformation. That's the Mughal way. It's being inspected by two needle-wielding tailors who keep muttering things like minor seamstress and not fatal. Unless it rains at an angle, you arch an eyebrow. They begin darning faster. While you wait, your mate hands you the list of support items. Tent rugs. Check. 2. 1 for prayer. 1 for not ruining your knees. Cushions. Check. 8 seems excessive, but 6 of them are purely orthopedic. Devotion is hard on the spine. Foldable writing desk. Check. Still missing a hinge, but Mirza the monkey sits on it most days, so it's technically functional. Curtains for privacy. Check. Embroidered with tiny lotuses. Completely unnecessary, and thus essential. You approve it all with a sigh and turn to the attendants preparing the companion tents, your ladies in waiting, your elderly chaperone, and the ever-growing group of noblewomen who have attached themselves to your caravan like spiritually motivated barnacles. One tent appears to be missing an entrance flap. Another is so small it resembles a changing booth for traveling acrobats. The third is mysteriously sticky. No one will explain why. You make notes. Firm, polite, queenly notes. Historians still argue whether Mughal women traveled in grand tent cities or smaller, more modest camps. Evidence suggests both, depending on rank, purpose, and distance. Some princesses traveled with full mobile courtscokes, poets, guards, even their own astrologers. Others took a smaller retinue, relying on regional hospitality and divine patience. You, as always, are aiming for a middle path that includes both sacred stillness and fully coordinated lantern hooks. Back in your chamber, you begin assembling your personal tent pouch. Not the tent itself, of course, but the things that make it yours. A sandalwood incense burner shaped like a lotus, a clay oil lamp, chipped but reliable, a soft cotton curtain to hang over the entrance at night, a small hand fan carved with the likeness of a gazelle, to thin books for bedtime reading, a packet of dried lavender, a spare comb. Then, your favorite item, a folded cloth stitched with constellations hand-drawn by your cousin during a particularly slow summer. It's wildly inaccurate, but you hang it on your tent wall during every journey. It reminds you that even maps can be wrong and still beautiful. Your maid adds a bundle of dried neem leaves to the pile. For mosquitoes, she says. You pretend to believe her. Really, they're for your nerves. You like the sound they make when rustled like paper prayers being whispered in the wind. By the time the sun is overhead, your tent supplies are packed, labeled, and handed off to a team of porters who immediately begin arguing over which mule can handle the incense burner. You leave them to it. Your job is done. But just as you're turning to go, you hear a high-pitched wail from the other side of the courtyard. It's Annie Soraya, and she is not pleased. You arrive just in time to see her flapping her arms at one of the attendants, demanding to know why her tent doesn't include a brazier, a footstool, or at least 3 spiritual cushions. You give the attendant a look that says fix it, then take Andy gently by the elbow. I packed you a fresh bundle of clove incense, you say, leading her back toward the shade. And a copy of the devotional poems you like. She softens. The ones with all the metaphors, all 12 metaphors. And 3 new footnotes. She exhales, then begins telling you, in detail, about her left knee's mood swings in humid weather. You nod. You've done your duty. That night, before bed, you sit cross-legged in the middle of your nearly finished packing and take out your tent diagram drawn with colored ink, labeled with care, lantern hooks, storage boxes, reading corner, meditation mat, monkey perch. Yes, you included Mirza. Of course you did. You trace the line slowly with your finger, imagining how it will all come together. The tent rising under a pink dawn sky, flaps tied back, incense curling toward the heavens, and you, inside, wrapped in a shawl that smells like rose petals and resolve. Tomorrow, it all begins. Tonight, you will dream of fabric and stars. You are halfway through reviewing your packing list for the 6th time, quietly muttering comb, lamp, grain, monkey. Yes, monkey, when a soft chime echoes through the corridor. It's the sound of Annie Tasneem's anklets, which means only one thing. The amulet inspection has begun. You barely have time to straighten your shawl before she appears at the doorway, swathed in 5 layers of pale blue cotton and a 6th layer of unsolicited spiritual authority. She carries a lacquered tray overflowing with charms, talismans, handwritten invocations, and 1 dried apricot with a prayer scribbled on its pit. It's time, she declares. We must ward off all future blisters, misfortunes, and overcooked lentils. You nod solemnly. The amulets are coming. This is not your first charm ceremony. The Mughal world is built on layers: faith, empire, superstition, sandalwood, and nestled somewhere in between is the deeply held belief that travel without protection is just asking for mischief. Not from evil spirits, necessarily, but from small, persistent annoyances that build into full-scale cosmic tantrums. You sit on a cushion while Annie Tasneem begins laying out the items. There's a silver thread bracelet to guard the ankles, a folded bit of parchment containing 7 sacred names to repel nausea, and a tiny wax figurine with no discernible features, whose purpose remains unclear, but whose presence is non-negotiable. Next comes the most controversial item of all, the cursed HAIRBRUSH. It's been in your family for generations. Every time someone forgets to bring it, something unfortunate happens: a sprained ankle, a lost earring, a spontaneous poetry recital by someone unqualified. It's not actually cursed. At least, not in the obvious way. But no one's willing to test the theory. You accept it wordlessly and pack it between 2 shawls. Annie Tasneem watches you closely. Don't brush after sunset, she warns. As always, you nod. You know the rules. Historians continue to argue over the role of personal charms and talismans in Mughal aristocratic life. Some claim they were purely symbolic, tokens of comfort and tradition. Others assert that they were treated with near-legal seriousness, their presence dutifully recorded in travel logs and inventories. You suspect it was both symbolic and practical, emotional and ceremonial, tangled together like jasmine vines on a dusty gate. Next, Tasneem produces a small drawstring pouch. Inside, dried rose petals, a few grains of raw rice, and what looks suspiciously like a shard of mirror. For seeing yourself clearly, she says, handing it to you. Even when everything else is confusing, you nearly laugh, but don't, you're too moved. This pouch, you know, has been blessed, whispered, over. Maybe even cried on. You place it in the small pocket of your favorite trunk, beside your extra ink tablets and a fig roll. Sacred space, your maid enters and begins adding a few of your own talismans to the pile. The sandalwood bead you held during your last illness. The coin your mother gave you before her final journey. A tiny whistle carved into the shape of a parrot. No one knows who made it. You've never blown it. But it feels necessary. Then come the letters, 3 in total, folded in silk. 1 to your father, 1 to your cousin who always forgets your birthday, and 1 to yourself. That last one is the hardest to pack. It contains a simple line. You don't have to arrive perfect. Just present. You pause after reading it. Fold it again. Place it beneath your prayer rug. Just as you're sealing the charm packet, your maid hesitates. There is one more item. She holds up a narrow scroll bound with red thread. You squint at the unfamiliar handwriting. It's from the court astrologer, she explains. A set of travel precautions, based on the alignment of the moon and your eyebrows. You blink. My eyebrows, she shrugs. Apparently, they're very communicative. You untie the scroll and read. Avoid mangoes on the 13th day. Do not speak to anyone named Phyros before noon. If you hear a parrot say your name, take a left turn. All signs favorable for new sandals on Fridays. You roll the scroll up with the tired grace of someone who knows better than to ignore these things even if they sound like poetry written during indigestion. By the time the amulet sorting is done, your chamber looks like a spiritual apothecary. Bundles tied with string, tiny sachets of herbs, parchment scraps, crumbs of sandalwood ash, to peacock feathers, 3 cloves, and a handwritten mantra you're pretty sure is upside down. Auntie Tasneem rises. You're ready, she says. You believe her. Later that evening, as the sun begins its long, slow descent behind the palace dome, you sit by the window and watch your caravan's protective layer quietly shimmer into place. Not in the form of guards or weapons, but in the way the lamps are trimmed. The way prayers are whispered into fabric folds. The way a cursed hairbrush finds its place between hope and habit. Outside, someone plays a soft raga on a bamboo flute. Farzana the goat mutters in her crate. Mirza has braided a string of prayer beads into your curtain. Everything feels prepared. Protected. Pending. You place your final charm, a tiny bronze bell, into your sleeve. It does not ward off evil. It just sounds beautiful when you walk. The night before departure, your palace becomes less a building and more a gentle storm. The halls echo with clinking trunks and murmured farewells, silk sleeves brushing against lamplit marble, the rustle of final instructions wrapped in gossip. Everyone, it seems, has a last-minute crisis to resolve, except you. You are in the courtyard. Your feet are bare on the smooth, cooled tiles. The stars have begun their quiet performance above, silver and silent, like the embroidery on your light shawl. Before you lies the perfumed garden. Not the large, showy one where poets recite under fountains and parrots are trained to say ambiguous compliments. No. This is the smaller, older garden tucked near the eastern wall. Partially overgrown. Partially forgotten. It's your favorite. You've come here to say goodbye, not to people. They'll get formal waves and carefully worded nods at dawn. This is your parting with the space itself. The trees you've watched grow crooked and lovely. The bench that used to wobble until you had it fixed, then missed the wobble. The stone path where you once dropped an entire bowl of saffron rice and then ate it anyway. You walk slowly between the flower beds. The air is thick with night-blooming jasmine, the kind that only opens its petals when the world has finally stopped talking. Your hand trails along the tall fronds of vetiver grass. The dew is starting to collect, cool against your fingertips. You move past the neem tree where your brother once tied a kite and left it there all summer. The kite is gone now, but the memory flaps quietly every time the wind picks up. You reach the marble bench near the center. Sit. Exhale. A frog chirps in the darkness. You smile. This is the part of travel no one talks about. The long inhale before the first step. The space between your known life and whatever waits just outside the gate. It feels like standing between two mirrors surrounded by reflections, unsure which way leads forward. Historians often overlook these moments. The quiet rituals, the secret goodbyes, the farewell not to a person, but to a routine. The way the light hits the steps at noon, the smell of coriander from the kitchen vent, The polite lies exchanged during evening strolls. These are the details you carry with you, folded invisibly, into your shawl. At the edge of the garden, a familiar voice breaks the silence. It's your youngest cousin, tiptoeing along the stone path in her too long robe, holding a lantern and a very confused-looking pigeon. "I think he wants to come," she whispers. The pigeon does not comment. You rise, walk over, and gently nudge the bird back into her hands. "He can't." You say. "He's guarding the garden now." She nods, satisfied, and disappears back into the hallway. You return to the bench, but now the silence feels different, softer, more complete. You rest your palm flat against the stone, absorbing its memory. You won't sit here again for a long while, maybe ever. That's what travel does. It turns the familiar into something temporary, then sacred. Eventually, you rise, you circle the garden one last time, not in a hurry, not even entirely consciously. You touch the bark of the neem tree, whisper to the dazzle, smile at the broken pot half buried under the fig bush. You pass the worn mosaic tile where you once slipped during the monsoon and ruined a silk tunic. You hated it then. Now, it feels like a blessing. As you exit, you whisper a quiet thanks to the moonflowers blooming beside the gate. You don't need to say what for. They understand. Back in your chamber, the packing is truly finished, not just to material things, but the invisible ones, the farewells, the little acceptances. Your maid stands beside your bed, combing her hair and humming a lullaby that might be older than the kingdom. Mirza is asleep in your travel basket, one paw draped dramatically over a sachet of cloves. Farzana, from what you're told, finally stopped trying to chew through her cray after someone bribed her with a fennel pastry. You move through the room one last time, brushing your fingers over the trunks, the soft folds of your shawls, the cool rim of your inked jar. Everything is ready. Everything is not. You lie down with your head resting on the soft cotton pillow your mother stitched with stars. You've slept on it since you were a child. You'll sleep on it again tomorrow, but the sky above will be different. As your eyes close, you picture the garden, the moonflowers, the pigeon. And the way the jasmine refused to bloom until night fell completely. Tomorrow, you will begin a new rhythm. Tonight, you let the old one lull you to sleep. The first sound of morning is not birdsong, or prayers, or even the squeal of stubborn camel harnesses. It is the groan of someone lifting a trunk far too heavy for one person, followed by a muttered curse and the dull thud of something that may have once been ceramic. You are awake instantly, not with panic, but with the quiet alertness of someone who knows a departure day waits for no one, not even princesses, with perfectly organized charm pouches. The room is still dark, cool, but alive with movement. Your maid has already lit the oil lamp, and shadows dance across the floor as she adjusts your traveling scarf. It's pale green today, embroidered along the edge with tiny birds in flight, your own subtle declaration to the morning. You stretch, step out of bed, and feel the chill of the stone floor beneath your feet one last time. It's oddly comforting, like the palace giving you a firm but gentle nudge out the door. Breakfast is a quiet affair. A bowl of sweetened milk, warm flat bread with crushed almonds, and a single preserved plum, sticky and tart, exactly how you like it. You eat in silence, surrounded by movement. Outside your chambers, the procession is forming. The courtyard is a theater of motion. Camels groaning as they are loaded, porters darting between bundles, priests murmuring blessings over carts of holy water, and Auntie Soraya loudly announcing that someone has misplaced her spiritual cushion, which may result in cosmic imbalance if not located within the hour. Your trunks are already on their way to the loading platform. The animal crates are lined up neatly, the peacocks preening as if departing for a poetry symposium, Farzana chewing absent-mindedly on her own tail, and Mirza the monkey sitting perfectly still, wearing a tiny sash he somehow acquired overnight. No one knows where from. You decide not to ask. The palanquin waits beneath the central arch, painted in subdued tones of rosewood and cream. It's been lined with soft cushions and draped with sheer fabric to allow air and privacy. It's the kind of transport that suggests spiritual seriousness, with just enough space for a few indulgences. You test the interior briefly, adjusting the angle of the reading pillow, then nod your approval. You're about to climb in when a servant approaches with a scroll. It's your travel document, more ceremonial than functional, a list of who you are, why you're traveling, and who to blame if something goes wrong. You sign it with a flourish. Your handwriting, as always, looks more confident than you feel. Historians often debate whether Mughal royal women traveled in palanquins, carts, or hidden compartments within larger caravans. The answer, like most things Mughal, is yes, all of the above, depending on the day, the mood, and the dust. You glance over the caravan. It stretches down the palace drive like a winding river of silk sandals, guards in crisp uniforms, servants in layered bundles of cloth, cousins riding sideways on donkeys, pretending to be serious, a mule with too many brass pots hanging from its sides. Someone has tied marigold garlands to the front camel's ears. He does not seem pleased. The sun is just beginning to crest the outer wall, and the call to depart is given. You feel it more than hear it. A ripple, a shift in posture, the way the musicians lift their drums, the way the guards square their shoulders, the way your own breath seems to catch. It's time. You step into the palanquin, settle onto the cushions, and draw the curtain half closed. Not because you want to hide, but because you want to watch from a place of stillness. The bearers lift you gently. The motion is smooth at first, then begins the familiar sway like being rocked by a well-meaning boat on a shallow sea. You've missed this feeling. It is not comfort, exactly, but transition. A soft jolt into the unknown. As you move through the palace gates, you glimpse your cousins waving from the upper balcony. A handkerchief floats down like a blessing. Someone tosses rose petals. You don't see who. You decide to believe it was your brother, even though he was last seen trying to teach Farzana to bow. The city begins to unfold around you. Narrow streets, still quiet in the early light. Doorways swept clean. Shopkeepers watching silently. Children pointing at the passing procession, unsure whether to be awed or amused. You offer a small wave. They wave back, then erupt into delighted giggles. You think of your garden, of the moonflowers, of the pigeon. Of the way everything now feels both distant and vivid, like a story you're still writing. Even as you read it aloud, Mirza makes a soft sound from the basket beside you. You peek in. He's chewing on the edge of a page from your bestiary. You gently remove it and replace with a piece of dried fig. He accepts the trade with dignity. The sun rises higher. The city falls away. You pass the last row of banyan trees, the old gate carved with prayers, and the stretch of road where the dust begins to taste different. This is the line. The true beginning. You lean back in the palanquin, draw your shawl tighter, and close your eyes for a moment, not to sleep, but to settle. The road stretches ahead, full of unknowns, but so are you. The first day on the road unfolds not with the epic grandeur of legend, but with the slow, persistent hum of practical discomfort. You've barely made it 5 miles from the city when your palanquin bearers encounter their first argument over whose shoulder height is throwing off the rhythm. The result? A charming tilt to your ride that leaves you feeling like a decorative vase on an uneven shelf. Still, you soldier on. The morning key is gentle at first, the kind that suggests it might stay friendly. It won't. By mid-morning, the air begins to thicken. Dust clings to everything: your sleeves, your shawl, even the corners of your fingernails, despite the gloves you swore would protect your manicure. They lie. You try to read. Open your bestiary. Stare at the square elephant, but the sway of the palanquin has turned from lullaby to lull. Eventually, you close the book, exhale, and watch the procession through a slit in the curtain. It's a beautiful mess. The guards march with more optimism than precision. The cooks shout at one another over the location of the lentil cauldrons. The peacocks are walking for now, refusing to be caged, and one has taken to striding directly in front of your palanquin, as if leading the entire caravan with imperial purpose. Mirza, naturally, is napping. You glance down. He's curled in a crescent shape beside your ink pouch, using a rose sachet as a pillow. Occasionally, he twitches. You assume he's dreaming of snacks or low-stakes rebellion. By noon, the caravan pauses for its first rest stop, a wide field, scattered with neem trees and the bones of old campfires. Tents begin to rise like cautious mushrooms. Your own pavilion, despite the porter's muttering, goes up surprisingly quickly. One tie comes loose, but the rest holds. Your tent has arrived. Inside, it's pleasantly dim. You sink onto a cushion and remove your shoes more ceremoniously than necessary. But you've earned the drama. Your feet are already protesting. You massage one absent-mindedly while your maid brings in a basin of cool water scented with vetiver and lime. The moment your toes touch the water, you let out a sound that might be mistaken for piety. Lunch is a mix of predictability and surprise. The lentils are, blessedly, still warm. The flatbread slightly scorched but acceptable. Someone has managed to pack pickled mango without spilling it across the medical kit, which feels like a minor miracle. You eat slowly, savoring the familiar tastes. Food on the road always tastes sharper, somehow more insistent, or perhaps it's that your hunger is more honest. Historians tend to gloss over what happened during these midday stops. The assumption seems to be that prayer and rest occupy most of the time, with little room for conversation or incident. They forget that pilgrimages are not quiet. They are bustling, personal, and often deeply silly. Case in point, the traveling physician insists on checking everyone's pulse this afternoon to ensure your heart is aligned with the moon. You endure this with a patient smile while he frowns at your wrist and recommends cutting back on tamarind. You ignore him. Elsewhere, your cousins are playing a game that involves pebbles, accusations of cheating, and a goat acting as an extremely disinterested judge. One tent has collapsed due to emotional fabric fatigue, and Auntie Soraya has been heard saying, "I told you this would happen," at least 6 times before tea. You, however, retreat into your tent and unroll your prayer rug. It's time, not just for prayer, but for breath, for space. You kneel, press your forehead to the soft cotton, and let everything else go: the sweat on your back, the soreness in your legs, the 27 things you probably forgot. In this moment, you are quiet, present, slightly smudged with turmeric, but spiritually intact. When you rise, the sun has shifted. The shadows stretch long across the field. The evening begins with preparation for the night camp. The lamps are trimmed, the goats tethered, the tents secured against mischievous breezes. You supervise from your perch, sipping spiced tea and pretending not to notice the monkey rearranging your reading corner. Dinner is less organized than lunch. Someone miscounted the bread. Arguments erupt. Solutions involve tearing things in half and generous helpings of chutney. You end up with a small pile of crushed chickpeas and a laugh. As the sky deepens into twilight, the musicians begin tuning their instruments. One flute, one drum, a single string instrument with a sound so mournful it feels like it's apologizing for every bad decision you've ever made. They play not for a crowd, but for the air, for the fading heat, the rising stars, the little joys that come after the dust settles. You sit just outside your tent, wrapped in your softest shawl, hair unpinned, bare feet on cool grass. You watch the flames flicker in the distance. Mirza dozes beside you. The peacocks finally agree to sleep. Farzana has managed to wedge herself beneath a bundle of rugs and now snores like a judgmental grandmother. You do not yet feel transcendent. You feel tired. But that, too, is sacred. This is the part no one writes poems about. The awkward, itchy, slightly too warm beginning of the journey, where the only miracle is that the water stayed cool, the tent stayed upright, and you remembered to bring your sandalwood fan. Tomorrow, you'll go further. Tonight, you rest, wrapped in fabric, surrounded by soft sounds, under a sky full of stars who don't care whether you brought the right sandals. The second day begins with an unexpected inspection, not from guards, officials, or holy men, but from the 3 most feared travel authorities in your life, your aunts. They arrive in a cluster of shawls, perfume, and judgment. Just as you're attempting to drink your morning tea, you manage a polite smile. Your maid vanishes at the speed of regret. Mirza dives into a trunk. "I hope," Auntie Soraya begins, already seated on your best cushion, "that you have remembered your backup ankle supports. She forgot them last year," whispers Auntie Tasneem, leaning over as if this is state intelligence, and ended up praying in a wheelbarrow. Auntie Bibi, silent until now, lifts the lid of your spice box and frowns. "Where's the asafoetida?" You sip your tea and lie. "It's in the other trunk." It is not, but you know better than to interrupt the morning ritual of all the evaluation. This is not merely meddling, this is tradition. Every Mughal woman of a certain age views herself as a walking checklist. Their scrutiny is love, wrapped in critique, garnished with superstition. Your aunts begin to pace your tent. First, they assess your bedding. Your pillow is acceptable, but emotionally unadventurous. Your shawl layering system is deemed too democratic, whatever that means. They move to your food storage. The pickled lime earns a nod. To dried figs, and I dash roll. Then comes the hookah debate. You've packed a travel hookah. Nothing extravagant, a small, brass base with a simple clay bowl and a cold hose. For quiet evenings, for ritual, for memory. You didn't intend to use it much. Maybe once or twice, when the road feels especially long. But the moment Auntie DB sees it, she gasps like you've invited scandal to dinner. You're bringing that. She is, Auntie Tasneem replies, already uncoiling the hose. Within minutes, a council has formed. Opinions bloom like lotus petals. One aunt insists it's medicinal. Another says it invites sand spirits. A third wants to know what blend you packed and whether she can borrow it. Historians never write about this part. They discuss diplomacy, architecture, lineage, but they leave out the sacred art of three Mughal women bickering over travel, smoking etiquette while seated on a prayer rug. And that is their loss. Eventually, a compromise is reached. The hookah may stay, provided it's not lit before sunset, never near the peacocks, and only if everyone agrees on flavor rotation. You nod solemnly and pretend this was always your plan. Then comes the most sacred part of the inspection. The wardrobe review. Your aunts are not subtle. They open trunks, they remove tunics, they hold each one up to the light and audibly sniff. This one's too thin, this one's too thick, this one is spiritually confusing. You offer a non-committal hum and pretend to adjust your inked jar. Eventually, they settle on one robe, a deep blue cotton weave with pale gold vines stitched around the hem. You wore it during last spring's harvest festival and one spilled lentil soup down the front, though you've since had it cleaned. They approve it. Barely. You thank them. They nod. The inspection is over. As they exit, Auntie Soraya stops in the doorway. You're doing well, she says softly. Just don't forget who you are. It sounds like a blessing. It might be a warning. You let it settle. Outside, the caravan is preparing to move. Your palanquin has been repositioned. The goat, still mildly grumpy, is being coaxed with chop dates. The peacocks are refusing to leave until someone replaces the reflective bowl they lost in a minor cooking accident. One porter is frantically trying to retrieve a shawl that flew into a patch of thorn bushes and has declared himself a martyr of fashion. The second leg of the journey begins. This time, you choose to ride atop a padded cart for a stretch more open air, less isolation. You perch beside the spice chest and your writing box, wrapped in a sun veil, sipping tamarind water from a cup that insists on leaking slightly but beautifully. You watch the landscape pass, flat scrubland, dry grass, the occasional tree standing like a bored sentinel, women in the distance drawing water from narrow wells, children herding goats. One bus stops to wave. You wave back, and he grins like he's seen a miracle. The road is dustier today. Your eyes sting a little, and your sandals are gathering an unfortunate layer of grime, but your spirits are high. The first day's stiffness has softened into rhythm. You no longer brace for every bump, you sway with them. Lunch is served under a lone banyan tree. It is lentils again. Your maid adds extra black salt. The monkey steals your napkin. A crow attempts to judge you from a nearby branch, but you are immune to bird-based shame. Later, during your rest hour, you write just a little, a line or two. You sketch a thought about the wind, about your aunts, about how even judgment can feel like home. You tuck it into your journal beside the dream. Notes, it feels small, quiet, true. Evening comes with a cool wine and one misplaced tent pole. Yours, the team scrambles. You remain calm. You sit cross-legged on a spare cushion and sip cardamom tea while chaos unfurls quietly around you. You don't interfere. Not yet. This is your new skill, serene detachment. It lasts 20 minutes. Then you get up and fix it yourself. Dinner is warm flatbread, stewed eggplant, and a surprisingly complex mango chutney. You don't ask who made it, you just say thank you. That night, as you lie in your tent, belly full, eyes heavy, and a monkey curled up like a comma at your feet, you think of your aunts, of their nose, their opinions, their maddening precision, and you smile, because tomorrow, you'll miss them. The third day of your journey begins with a bird in your tent, not a metaphorical bird, not a poetic bird. A very real, very large parrot that has somehow slipped past two guards, one maid, and a goat that was specifically stationed for nose detection. It is perched on your inked jar, staring at your reflection in a bowl of rosewater and occasionally muttering, "Nice robe." You sit up slowly, make eye contact, and whisper, "Thank you." It nods. Then it flies out through the flap. Your maid enters a moment later, eyes wide, breath short. Was there? Yes. You say, and he approves of my robe. She nods. She doesn't ask further questions. It's that kind of day. Outside, the caravan is already in motion. Your trunks have been loaded. the cooking fire's put out, and the first clattering cart has rolled over the horizon with a creaking sound that vaguely resembles the opening bars of a lullaby. You freshen up quickly, rosewater, a drop of sandalwood, oil behind each ear, a scarf loosely wrapped to keep the dust from your braid. You eat standing up, chewing warm bread stuffed with fenugreek and honey, all dictating to your assistant which pouches still need to be rearranged. Mirza helps by stealing one and burying it under your cushion. The road today curves gently, tracing the edge of a slow-moving river. You catch glimpses of the water through your palanquin curtain. Narrow boats bobbing, women washing clothes and singing. Long strings of laundry like prayer flags across the shore. The scent of wet earth wafts through the caravan, mingling with the sharper notes of brass polish and fried onions. There's a calm rhythm now. Walk, sway, rest, repeat. The first day fuss has settled into a kind of resigned elegance. Even the camel drivers speak less and grunt more. By midday, you stop at a small shrine. It wasn't on the route, but one of the senior guards requested a short detour for auspicious blessings and ankles stretching. You descend from your palanquin, stretch your limbs, and approach the low stone platform draped with yellow cloth and garlands. A few clay lamps flicker in shallow alcoves. A priest waves incense with a hand that seems too graceful for a man holding burning twigs. You press your palms together, douse slightly, and offer a small pouch of saffron wrapped in silk, stitched with gold thread, scented faintly with nostalgia. It's placed on the altar with care. You whisper a quiet intention. Nothing grand, just a request for safe passage and reasonably hygienic food. Then, as you turn to leave, the priest leans in and says, "Your goat is blessed now." 2. You blink. "You blessed Farzana. She looked like she needed it." You nod. You do not argue with holy men who can read goats. Back on the road, the caravan rolls on. The sun climbs, the shade recedes. You begin to understand why so many historical paintings of royal journeys feature parasols and fainting expressions. You read a little another page from your poetry book, an allegory involving mango trees and misplaced shoes. You write a little half a line about birds who approve of your fashion sense. You nap briefly, head resting against a cushion that smells like cardamom and ink. When you wake, it's to the sound of music. Soft, distant, flute and drum. A village nearby, perhaps, or a traveling performer who's found his way to your cooks. You lift the curtain, and there it is, the first settlement since leaving the city. A cluster of thatched roofs, smoke rising in lazy spirals, children running barefoot between trees. Women carrying pots, men carrying gossip. It's not large, not regal, but it hums with life. And that hum catches the caravan in its rhythm. Your party is greeted politely, if not extravagantly. They've seen pilgrims before. You're offered a place to rest, some water, and what appears to be a very overcooked bowl of lentils. You eat 3 spoonfuls out of respect, then quietly pass it to Mirza, who eats 2 and makes eye contact for the 3rd. You both agree to stop. There is music that evening, real music, not just the somber notes of your court players. The village brings drums, stringed instruments, rattles made from seed pods, and voices that rise in harmonies older than the roads themselves. You sit beneath a tree with henna leaves overhead and watch the sun slip sideways behind a sloping roof. Your tent is half-pitched in the background. Your cousins have gathered to play another game involving dice, mild cheating, and accusations of supernatural interference. You let them be. Tonight, you are just one among many. You are not a princess, not a planner, not a pilgrim with carefully wrapped perfume bottles. You are a traveler beneath an orange sky, listening to music you don't understand, surrounded by people you don't know, and somehow, it feels like home. The villagers invite your party to stay the night. You agree. The ground is flatter here. The food is less offensive if you ask them not to season it like vengeance. And the stars, oh, the stars are close enough to pluck. Later, in your tent, you lie with the flaps open, staring out at a fire that's been left to smolder. Someone sings softly in the distance. A child laughs. The goat sighs. You think of the priest, of the river, of the parrot. You do not think of the palace. Not tonight. Tonight, you are the sum of your dust, your shawl, your dry hands, your quietly content heart, and that's more than enough. You wake not to drums or the groaning of tent poles, but to the sound of absolute stillness, a kind of soft, hovering hush that feels borrowed from a dream. Outside your tent, the village is not yet awake, or perhaps it is, but respectfully. Quiet for the sake of travelers who might be spiritual, fragile, or just not morning people. You stretch beneath your cotton shawl, already warm with the promise of day, and sit up slowly. Mirza is awake, blinking at you from atop your pillow, looking far too alert for someone who spent the night sneaking pickled turnips from unattended food baskets. Your maid enters with a basin of water and an update. The caravan will linger here until midday to allow for rest, repairs, and tent rebundling. Whatever that means, you nod, grateful for the pause. Your knees are grateful, too. After a quick rinse and a few mouthfuls of date-stuffed bread, you step outside into the early light. The sky is that hazy pink that exists only for about 10 minutes each day. The earth smells like dew and cooked rice. Somewhere, someone is grinding spices. Someone else is already sweeping. You decide to walk. No guards, no fanfare. Just you in a soft tunic, slippers too thin for goat pads, and a vague sense of curiosity. You pass the cooking circle where the village women are pressing dough into flat rounds and humming a tune with no real melody, just rhythm. They nod politely, you nod back. One of them offers you a piece, you take it. It's perfect. You find yourself wandering toward the edge of the village, where the path narrows and a low fence of woven branches separates fields of something green and sprouting. A boy sits beside a buffalo, sketching in the dirt with a stick. He looks up, grins, then returns to his masterpiece, a very wobbly-looking elephant with what you choose to interpret as a crown. You crouch beside him and add a line. He watches your hand carefully. When you're done, he claps, then adds what might be a monocle. You smile. Historians rarely write about these moments. They document the grand decisions, the processions, the edicts and scrolls and architectural feats. But they skip the buffalo mornings, the idle doodles. The way a princess once sat in the dust beside a village boy and co-created an elephant with dubious anatomy. Eventually, you return to camp. By now, the tent menders are at work, muttering over bent pegs and debating whether a prayer mat qualifies as structural reinforcement. The cooking team is unloading fresh produce offered by the villagers: cucumbers, wild herbs, a mysterious tuber that everyone agrees might be turnip adjacent. You supervise the packing loosely, mostly as an excuse to sit on a cushion and sip lime water while pretending to be busy. Your maid finds you a new scarf lighter for the hotter roads ahead. It's dyed pale yellow, the color of sunlight through silk, and patterned with a design that looks suspiciously like dancing squirrels. You approve it anyway. By midday, the caravan is ready again. The farewell to the village is both formal and affectionate. A prayer offered, a few coins exchanged, one confused tarot given to a child who swears he can teach it philosophy. You take a final look at the huts, the smoke trails, the crooked fence, and you tuck it all away in memory, like a pressed flower. The road ahead is drier now. Due steer. The vegetation thins, replaced by scrub grass and low trees that provide shade only if you beg nicely. The sun beats down with a confidence bordering on arrogance. You pull the scarf over your head and lean back in the palanquin. This stretch of road is known, in old records, as the Thinking Road, not because it's especially scenic, or dramatic, or difficult, but because it offers no distractions, no temples, no villages, just you and the slow, steady rhythm of footsteps, wheels, and your own thoughts. You think of the garden, the sound the neem tree makes when wine moves through its top branches, the quiet grief of packing a pillow you've slept on since childhood, the fact that you now know 3 separate people who believe monkeys can be spiritually attuned. You think about what lies ahead: the shrine, the prayers, the rituals, and you wonder what will be asked of you there, not by priests, or tradition, or even expectation, but by yourself. What part of you must offer? What part will be returned? A historian might call this philosophical rumination. A cousin would call it overthinking. You call it road thoughts. You arrive at that night's camp just as the sky turns the color of warm copper. The location is less charming than the village, flat, stony, with a breeze that smells faintly of tired camels, but the tent is set up quickly, and your lanterns glow with surprising cheer. Dinner is spiced rice with fried okra and a sauce no one can identify, but everyone finishes. Mirza eats 3 lentils and then tries to wear a napkin as a turban. You pretend not to notice. As night falls, you sit outside your tent on a cushion that once belonged to your great-aunt. You sip sweet milk. You write one line in your journal: today, I drew an elephant that wore a crown. It's not profound. It's not poetic. But it's true, and maybe that's enough for now. Day 4 begins with blisters, the threat of bandits, and a camel that refuses to stand up unless someone sings to it in D minor. You sit cross-legged in the corner of your tent, one slipper off, staring at the developing tragedy on your left heel. It is not noble. It is not dignified. It is a small, round betrayal caused by an overly enthusiastic walk around the previous day's campsite, during which you insisted on inspecting every cooking fire, tent peg, and oddly shaped root. You sigh. Your mate arrives bearing a bowl of cool neem water and the kind of expression that says, "I told you so," without needing to say it. She applies the poultice gently, while humming a lullaby meant for restless infants. You pretend to be too regal to wince. Outside, the caravan is slow to stir. The night brought wine loud, dry, full of whispered sand. One tent collapsed, a lantern fell over. Farzana the goat broke free and attempted to chew through someone's flute case. Mirza, in a fit of nocturnal independence, wandered off and was found curled up in a spice sack, smelling of turmeric and existential confusion. Despite this, you are determined to depart on time. Your palanquin is adjusted for comfort. Extra cushions are added, the curtain tied slightly higher for airflow. You tuck your surfoot beneath you and settle in with a quiet prayer at a larger than usual piece of candied ginger. The caravan winds deeper into open country. The terrain has shifted flatter, but more exposed. The trees are sparser now, twisted by sun and stubbornness. The horizon flickers with heat. Dust curls behind every step. You feel like a ribbon of silk pulled across a dry table. Around midday, the pace slows. A scout rides up beside your palanquin and offers a cautious report. The trail ahead may harbor bandits, or, more accurately, a group of entrepreneurial nomads with loose interpretations of ownership. It is not a direct threat, just a possibility. Your guards reposition, your maids tighten their veils, your goat is unmoved. Historians often portray such moments as grand decisions. Do the rurals press forward, rear out, or confront? But real life offers fewer dramatics. The answer is usually, keep moving, but with more side glances. You do exactly that. Still, you can feel it beneath the surface of the procession, a ripple of alertness. Hands rest closer to dagger hilts. The chatter dims. The road grows longer. To distract yourself, you attempt to game with your cousin. It involves counting trees that look like they're trying to fall over and assigning them personalities. You name one resigned uncle, another secret romantic, a third becomes former poet turned bureaucrat. It helps, briefly. Then, in the distance, figures. Your palanquin halts. 3 men stand near a rock outcrop, dusty robes, sun-darkened faces, and that unmistakable posture of people who have been waiting. They don't approach, they don't wave, they just stand, watching. Your guards tighten their formation. The caravan does not stop. It flows forward, slowly, like water navigating around a fallen branch. The figures remain still as the procession passes, silent, unmoving. No one speaks until they're out of sight. Later, a scout reports they disappeared shortly after. No camp, no horses, no sign they were ever there. You murmur your thanks, offer a prayer beneath your breath, and turn your attention to your ink and scrolls. You write, "Today, we passed shadows in human form." No words, no movement, just warning, but also no harm. And that is a kind of blessing. Lunch is quieter than usual, even the pickles taste subdued. You rest in your tent afterward, rereading lines from your grandmother's devotional journal. The pages smell like dust and saffron. One note reads, "When the road grows dry, ask it what it remembers." You do not understand it. Not fully, but you read it twice. That evening, camp is set up on the edge of a rocky plain. The stones are warm from the day's heat. You sit on a low cushion outside your tent, watching the colors shift from gold to rust to shadow. Someone lights a fire. Someone else begins to sing. The song is unfamiliar, an old folk tune, perhaps. Its notes rise slowly, tumble down, and hover in the air like birds unsure of their next flight. You close your eyes. Let it fill the silence left by the day. Your maid bandages your foot again. It is not worse, but not better. You joke about renouncing all shoes and becoming a barefoot ascetic. She does not laugh. Mirza appears with a stolen flatbread, tears it in half, and offers you the larger piece. You accept. As night falls, you find yourself rereading your own words. The ink is blotchy, the parchment slightly wrinkled, but the thoughts hold. Just warning, but also no harm. You write below it, Perhaps peace is not the absence of trouble. Perhaps it is the passage through it, with nothing missing on the other side. The lantern flickers, you lie back, Farzana sighs, your cousin snores, the wind is calm again. You sleep with one foot slightly elevated, one hand resting on your journal, and the faint taste of ginger still on your tongue. The camp stirs to life not with urgency, but with the kind of deliberate sluggishness known only to those who have been on the road long enough to forget what day it is. You wake slowly, stretching beneath the linen canopy of your tent, aware of a soreness in your shoulders that seems to hum with every breath. Today, according to the schedule, is a festival day, which, in the language of Mughal caravan logistics, translates to a pause in forward motion, a visit to a nearby village or sacred site, a great deal of ceremonial standing, and at least one meal cooked by people who are trying their very best and probably overusing cloves. You sit up, rub your eyes, and whisper a silent plea for moderate spices. Your mate enters moments later, already fussing with your scarf. We've arrived early, she says. The village is preparing a welcome. The local officials have requested a moment of your time. You arch an eyebrow, a short greeting. Some food, possibly dancing. You sigh, stretch your arms. Say yes. By the time you're dressed in a modest but strategically impressive saffron-colored robe embroidered with geometric vines, quiet gold thread shimmering along the hem, the tent is buzzing. Someone has brought out the brass cups reserved for diplomacy. Someone else is attempting to untangle a garland of marigolds that has unfortunately developed knots worthy of epic poetry. Mirza is already halfway up the central tent pole, chewing on a card that may have once held important prayer verses. You retrieve it, replace it with a dried fig, and whisper, "At least act like you're literate today." The village, when you arrive, is built along a slope of gentle hills and flowering trees. Its houses are made of clay and kindness. There's a wide courtyard where women are decorating the ground with intricate chalk designs. A group of children stare at your caravan with wide eyes, then scatter when one of your guards winks at them. The local headman greets you with a reverent bow. He is followed by a procession of fruit offerings, musicians with instruments that appear to be made of gourds and good intentions, and one extremely serious boy carrying a basket of boiled eggs, like he's presenting jewels. You offer a smile, a graceful nod, and accept a small tray of syrup-soaked pastries that immediately stick to your fingers. They're too sweet, too warm, and entirely perfect. The formalities begin. You're seated beneath a canopy woven with fresh palm fronds and shade. The village elders offer garlands, recite a few blessings, and then begin their performance. A traditional dance accompanied by rhythmic clapping and chanting that feels less like entertainment and more like invocation. It's beautiful. Rough. Around the edges, some dancers forget their steps. One flute player nearly chokes on a bug, but there's sincerity in every movement. And when one of the singers forgets the verse and starts laughing mid-chant, the whole village laughs with him, not in mockery, but in harmony. Historians might categorize such visits as ritual hospitality. They'll write about diplomacy, about soft power, about the exchange of symbolic gifts. But you know better. This is not politics. This is people doing their best to welcome a stranger. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the drumbeat settle into your ribs. The air smells of dust, cardamom, and blooming hibiscus. When you open your eyes, a small girl has appeared beside you, holding out a bracelet woven from reeds and red thread. You reach down, take it gently, and slip it on. "Will you stay?" she asks. You pause. "No," you say softly, "but I will remember." Lunch is served on broad banana leaves, rice with lentils, flatbread smeared with tamarind paste, and a dish that might be stewed eggplant or a bold experiment in root chemistry. You eat it all politely, slowly, keeping your expressions neutral. Your cousin, however, does not. She gags dramatically on a single bite and spends the next 10 minutes describing the taste as haunting. You hand her a slice of lime and remind her that ghosts are people too. After the meal, there is tea, spiced, strong, and served in chipped cups that feel more genuine than any porcelain in your palace. The villagers ask if you'd like to see their temple, their oldest tree, their well that sings at dusk. You say yes to all of it. You spend the afternoon wandering. You run your fingers over carved stones that have stood longer than your dynasty. You peer into a well that hums faintly. When the wind shifts, you sit beneath a tree that once sheltered a poet, according to a man who swears he's a descendant, though he also says the poet was a monkey. So you take it with a grain of salt. The sun begins to lower. You return to camp tired, dust-streaked, garlanded, and clutching a small bundle of marigold seeds gifted by a woman who claimed they'll only bloom when planted with joy. You tuck them into your journal. Evening brings a quieter rhythm. You recline in your tent, feet bare, shawl draped loosely across your shoulders. Mirza is asleep on your scrolls. Your maid brushes your hair with a carved sandalwood comb, murmuring softly about road conditions and whether tomorrow will be blessedly uneventful. You write a lie before sleep. The food was overcooked. The welcome was perfect, and I wore a bracelet of reeds like it was gold. That night, you dream of laughter and chalk drawings. Of warm rice and singing wells, of staying just a little longer. You leave the village with marigold petals in your hair and at least 3 mysterious jars of food tucked into someone's saddlebag for later. The farewell is genuine though relaxed. This wasn't a grand royal send-off, just a gentle wave from people who will remember the visit in passing, like a dream with saffron-colored robes and a goat who stared too hard. Back on the road, things feel different. You pass the halfway point. The caravan moves with that particular brand of tired momentum you only get after days on the trail, no longer fresh, not yet triumphant, just rolling steadily towards something you no longer need to define. Not your palanquin creaks less today. Maybe the bearers have adjusted their grip. Maybe you've simply surrendered to the rhythm. You rest your chin in your hand and watch the countryside slide past. More rocks now, fewer trees. The scrub grows lower, the wind more persistent. Mirza, ever adaptive, has made himself a nest from 2 shawls and one unfortunately repurposed map. You do not scold him. He is, after all, a logistical genius in his own right. Lunch is late and a little grim. You stopped early to water the animals, but by the time the cooking team was ready, the firewood was down, the spices got mixed up, and someone spilled an entire jar of lentil paste into a basket of dates. What emerges is edible. Barely. You chew with diplomatic neutrality. Your cousin, on the other hand, declares her lentils vengeful and refuses to eat anything that smells like mustard. She snacks instead on emergency mango slices, which she pretends to share with you, but mostly doesn't. You pass her a note written on the back of a temple pamphlet. Your mango is judging me. She giggles, and for a moment, you forget the dust. The road ahead dips into a valley. You're told a river used to run here long ago. Now, it's just sand and ghost reeds. But the dip offers shelter from wind, and so the caravan slows to make camp early. You watch as the tents go up less ceremoniously now, more like habits in motion. Poles slotted, ropes tied, complaints murmured without volume. You don't bother supervising this time. You find a flat stone, sit down, and breathe. There's something strange in the air, dried, yes, but also charged, like a hush that belongs to something ancient. You ask one of the porters what this valley is called. He shrugs. We call it the place between. Then adds, as if explaining the obvious, it's where nothing grows, but everything listens. You make a note to use that line in a poem. After settling in, you take your ink and paper and wander a little. The wind whistles softly through brittle grasses. Your slippers leave faint marks in the sand. Erased within minutes. You find a low boulder and sit, and you write. Not much. Just fragments, but they come fast. The tent leans like it's tired too. My cousin's mango was not kind. The wind here smells like old secrets. You pause, then add, what am I carrying that I still haven't unpacked? You don't mean luggage. Back at camp, the lanterns glow. Dinner is better than lunch, though still aggressively turmeric forward. A traveling musician appears from nowhere, offering 3 songs in exchange for a warm meal. You invite him to sit near the fire. He sings of birds that nest in old shoes, of rivers that remember names, of camels with wise opinions. His voice is cracked but sure, and the children watch him like he might conjure stars from his sleeves. Later, someone asks if you'll recite a poem. You hesitate. Then stand, and you read one of your own. Something quiet, unrhymed, barely finished, about a tree that wanted to leave the ground. You don't explain it. You just let it sit there, like a bowl left out for rain. When you return to your tent, your maid is already preparing your sleeping things. She's tucked dried basil under your pillow, an old trick for warding off bad dreams. You smile, say nothing. Mirza is curled up in a basket of scarves. Farzana is snoring gently against a pile of lentil sacks. Your cousin is whispering something to a candle as if it might whisper back. You take one last look at the valley before you close the flap, the place between. The world feels thinner here, like you could step through it if you weren't careful. You lie down, trace a line on your wrist, and whisper to no one in particular, "I'm still here." And that is both question and answer. The morning begins not with no's, but with absence. No shouts, no crashing pots, no urgent squabble over misplaced cushions. Just stillness, the kind that suggests even the sun is rising a little more solely out of respect. You open your eyes and realize it's your last morning on the road. Today, you arrive, you lie still for a moment longer, listening to the soft hush of canvas swaying overhead. Your pillow smells faintly of basil and dust. Mirzad is curled at your feet, paw twitching, in a dream that's probably food-related. The lantern has burned itself out in the night, its wick curled like a question mark. You sit up slowly, stretch your arms, and stare at your packed trunk still closed, still tidy, as though it might refuse to admit the journey is nearly done. Your maid enters without a word. She knows. She's already begun folding the bedding, laying out your simplest robe, a white cotton wrap embroidered at the hem with just a single line of blue. It's the color of quiet resolve, the robe you saved for today. There's no ceremony, no fanfare, just a cup of warm milk steeped with fennel, a bit of sesame bread softened with honey, and the feeling of being at the edge of something both familiar and unknown. The caravan is quieter. The tents come down with little conversation. The peacocks are subdued. Farzana looks suspiciously emotional. Even the guards carry their spears with less bravado. Everyone knows this is the final stretch. The road ahead will be short, but the moment of arrival that will be long. You sit once more in your palanquin, settled among soft cushions and woven silences. You draw the curtain back and watch. The landscape changes gradually. The scrub thins, the trees begin to return low. Tamarinds with swinging seed pods, then tall palms, and finally, the scent of neem once more. The earth is redder here. The air smells like sanctity and sweat. And then before you're even sure you're ready, you see it. The shrine, not no grand towers, no opulent gate, just a rise of white stone, half veiled by trees, weathered at the edges, quietly luminous. It sits like it has always been there, like it belongs not to any one ruler or faith, but to the very concept of stillness. Your palanquin slows, the bearers stop, you step down slowly, your bare feet pressing into warm dirt. You walk the rest of the way. No one calls your name. No one announces your title. You are simply a woman in a white robe, walking toward a place that smells of prayers and old stone. At the foot of the shrine, you pause. It isn't large. A single chamber, some steps, a low wall where people have left tokens, ribbons, flowers, cracked bangles, even a small mirror. You find yourself adding the bracelet of reeds from the village. It looks fragile next to the others. It is. You bow your head, place your palm against the wall, and breathe. There are no trumpets, no visions. Just the weight of your breath, the hum of wind, and the quiet memory of everyone who's ever stood here asking for something. You do not ask, you just listen. Later, your maid finds you seated beside the shrine, sketching something into the dust with a twig. It might be poetry, it might be a shopping list. You're not entirely sure. She offers you water. You drink. It tastes different here. You return to the camp that afternoon to the smell of boiled rice and sandalwood. Your cousins are unpacking. Nothing in particular. The monkey is learning to play a bell. Your goat is eating a devotional pamphlet. You do not intervene. Evening comes. You write by lantern light. I arrived. No procession, no certainty. Just feet in the dust, a hand on the wall, and a sky full of things I didn't know I needed. You sleep early. And well, you dream of nothing. Just rest. Let yourself linger here. The journey is done, but you don't need to rush away. Breathe in that warm, slightly smoky evening air, the kind that smells like lentils and old stone. The lanterns flicker gently at the edge of your tent, casting soft gold across the folded cushions and half-packed trunks. Somewhere beyond the trees, a goat coughs, and a monkey rattles a pouch of dried figs with quiet victory. The shrine is still out there, still glowing faintly under a canopy of stars. You remember how it felt, the coolness of the stone under your fingertips, the hush of the courtyard, the way your body knew to bow before your mind did. You didn't have to ask anything. You didn't have to know what came next. You just stood there. And somehow, that was enough. Now, your shawl is wrapped around your shoulders. The travel dust has settled into your skin, and your muscles hum with the memory of motion. But your heart is still. And in that stillness, there is room to sleep, room to let go of the sandals, the spices, the scrolls, room to be exactly what you are. Quiet, softened, just a little bit wiser. Close your eyes, let the last glow of the lantern fade. The journey brought you here, but now, it carries you gently into rest. Sweet dreams.